So it's like a sitcom of every thing that you watch on TV. It's like you're muted. So hello everyone, I'm Paul Ha, the director of the List Visual Arts Center, and I'm thrilled here to welcome Ethel Kessler. And welcome to the virtual List Visual Arts Center. And for the next hour or so, we're going to talk about stamps, art, and the United States Postal Service. And I think the last 15 to 10 minutes, we'll have a question and answer, and there's a little button on the bottom right, and we'll try to read them as many as we can and get to them. So Ethel has been in the DC area for the last 30 years, and she's a creative director of the Kessler Design Group. And it's a women-owned design communications firm, and they do strategy and design and many, many things. And they've won over 200 design awards, and she designed this particular Ruth Asawa stamp, but in addition to that, they've done over 200 stamps, right? Is that correct, Ethel?
Yes.
That is crazy. That is crazy. So, and so today I just thought our folks, the people who know the list, we all know Ruth Asawa, and we think she's a fantastic artist. And I started noticing when it was first announced by the post office, the buildup of excitement among the art folks, the museum folks, the gallery folks, artists in particular too. And then when it was released, it just went crazy. And I think, Ruth in a way is an artist, and she's not someone who you would immediately think would get a stamp. By the way, none of us know how you get a stamp, so it'd be great if we can talk about that. But so I think we were so enthralled, and everyone really rallied around this stamp. And then I started noticing there was a talk of, using the stamp to vote and to buy as many of these stamps as possible. And so I thought it'd be great to get in contact with you, to have our audience find out how a stamp comes to be. But let me just share with you some of the crazy conversation that was going around this stamp. And here's a beautiful stamp that you designed. And then when the post office announced that, hey, we're going to be honoring Ruth Asawa and her legacy with our stamps, and then you start getting other people saying, fantastic, we can't wait for this stamp to come out. SF MoMA, I was excited, I tweeted about it. Sculpture Center was excited about it. And then when it did come out, people got a hold of it and they were in love with the stamp. They loved everything about it. They loved the design. They loved the way it looked, how it represented the artist's work. It was pretty much all over among artists, institutions, Black Mountain College, where she studied for a while, locally at the ICA, Los Angeles County Museum, San Jose, the DeYoung Museum, where she had an exhibition. And then there was starting to get a little bit of a murmur about people saying, we can save the US Post Service by buying these stamps. And Alice Wu, who directed and wrote a beautiful movie, the half of it. And then, our local paper, Boston Globe, just in time for mail-in ballot. And then I think this is Jessica Barron, who's a poet. And she said, I know it's not likely, but I'm going to do this anyway. And I think that's pretty much a sentiment that this stamp brought us hope and a way for us to feel good about ourselves just by spending a couple of dollars and having an object in our hand that's so beautiful and powerful, which represented this artist. So how did this stamp come to be, Ethel?
Well, stamps come to be because the Citizen Stamp Advisory Committee chooses a subject. And sometimes they choose a subject that's specific. And you could say, we know that there have been presidential stamps, and we know that they come out at a certain point in time after they've died. Everybody who's on a stamp has died, and so it's an acknowledgement of their legacy, of their work. This this body of work was not known to me. I mean, I saw it because, you know, we start talking about things several years in advance, years in advance. So I started, you know, checking galleries and looking at some of the work. But you don't know until you start looking at how have they been photographed, whether it's viable at stamp size. So we can talk more about that, but one of the great things about Ruth Asawa's work is that it's very, not only an ephemeral, but geometric lines and shapes. So as long as it's well photographed, it's going to be able to get reduced onto a stamp. But the whole first conversation starts with the Citizen Stamp Advisory Committee, and they are people from all over the country with expertise in many, many, many different areas. Sometimes it's a more challenging subject, and I have one to show you today. And sometimes it's a portrait of the person, and sometimes, you know, so all of that. And just in the process of designing, one gets to learn so much. So I was immersed in her work, immersed in photos of her work. I realized that there's work that were drawings and not sculptures. And I know that it was very near and dear to the heart of the estate people that we show a diversity of work. But you know, you're showing these tiny little gems.
Yes.
One pane on one, it's not a stamp, there's 10 stamps, right? And then there's a side panel, we call it a selvage, and that's meant to give some context to the work. But you can't put everything in. You just have to keep eliminating until you get it down to its essence.
Yeah, and I do want to recognize that the daughters of Ruth Asawa is on this conversation and on this call, Aiko Kunio and Addie Lanier. So I want to welcome them. And I know that Maria Nevelson from the Louise Nevelson Foundation is also on this call, and that you created a beautiful stamp for them. And I'm going to show you the beautiful Louise Nevelson that we have on our campus at MIT.
Excellent.
But, and I think none of us really think about it, but having worked in the museum world for quite a bit, you know, it is a very physical kind of experience you have with artwork. And so whether it's an installation or a painting or sculpture, how do you take a 10-foot painting of a Pollock or a 20-foot tall Louise Nevelson or a room installation of Ruth Asawa and turn it into, I believe the stamp sizes are 0.87 by 0.97 inches.
Some of them are a little different than that, but that's a general size. That's a general size. Let me, in order to answer that question, let me show you something. Is that okay?
Excellent, of course.
I want to show you this pane of stamps, abstract expressionists. A couple of those are typical stamp sizes, but not all of them, because as you pointed out, the Pollock, I think is twice the size of a normal stamp. But there was no way, I didn't think, that there was any way to reduce this art to fit, and then all the stamps would have been the same size, and you would have had a detail of each of the stamps. That could have been one way to do it. but I felt more like hanging the show, so to speak, on this pane of stamps, and then making sure that the Motherwell was larger than most, and then that the some of them that were intentionally smaller are actually the normal size of a stamp. But you know, there's always a question of how do you get into the exhibit in a way. So the edges, I'm going to move back just a little bit more. You can see the edge, the black edges of the stamp sheet, but that's not, whoops, let's see where I can go to. There is a
yeah,
back there.
Barnett Newman.
Barnett Newman, and the edges, the black edges of the Barnett Newman are the painted edges of the stamp sheet itself. So I wasn't trying to facsimile that. I wanted to use the actual painted line. Maybe that's going overboard a little bit. I don't know if anybody noticed it, but
no, it's great. and it's funny because you know, when we posted that we're going to be having this conversation, somebody emailed me and said, I never knew there was an art director at the U.S. Post Service, you know, and or someone who directed the art. But of course that makes sense. Somebody has to think about all the little details like you just spoke about to make these decisions. In the end, you know, ultimately it becomes the stamp. And you've been doing stamps for them for the past 15 years or so. Is that correct?
24.
Oh,
counting.
I was only off by a decade. But
I am, there are 4 of us that are on contract, and just happens to be 2 women and 2 men, and the 2 women have been doing it longer than the 2 men have. For whatever reason, there were other people in the past. It is such an honor. It is such a great gig. You know, it is just a remarkable thing. And I think 1996 is when I was first brought onto the team. In 1997, the breast cancer stamp was approved by Congress, and it had to come out by 1998. So no other projects that I had already started working on, like it flew right in front of everything else. So 1998 was the first stamp that I did that was issued.
And is that stamp still in production?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing, you know, because I learned through the Andy Warhol stamp, the sheet of stamp, that if you like something, you should buy a lot of it because sometimes they just stop making them.
Yes,
right?
It's true for all the other stamps. For the semi-postal, they haven't been able to take it off sale since it started. It's always needed an act of Congress to be continued. And at this point, I think that they've printed something like 3.5 billion
Oh my God.
stamps. That doesn't mean they've sold them all yet. You can get them. But if they don't have them in the post office and they run down, they're going to print them. Says me. It is because that's a semi-postal, and it was the country's first semi-postal. It raised money for a cause that doesn't normally. They've only been a few of those kinds of stamps. Most of them start with a 2-year run, and this has been a 23-year run, or 20. I mean, it's really pretty amazing. $91 million has been raised for breast cancer research.
That's fantastic. So I will admit to you and our audience that when the Ruth Asawa stamp was announced, I went online and bought 100 sheets because I learned my lesson with the Warhol, because I only have one sheet left. And if they want to reprint the Warhol, I'd be more than happy to buy 100 sheet more.
All right, but that 100 isn't going to do it for a press run.
But let me go through all the other stamps that the US Post Service has done. Oops. So we're looking at this beautiful one here. And I do love the diversity of the objects and the subtle color that you incorporated into it. And also the fact that you have the artist sitting there with the drawing. I think it's really fantastic. But you've also done a Noguchi stamp, a sheet of Noguchi stamp, which is,
Postal Service has, yes, they're gorgeous.
yes, the Andrew Wyeth, I think there's one coveted stamp that everyone uses and all the rest people just kind of like, and the Frida Kahlo stamp, I think, beautiful, recognizing a fantastic artist. And then you've done a whole bunch of, the Post Service has done a whole bunch of other ones like Romare Bearden stamp and Mary Cassatt. And this is the one that you brought up, Abstract Expressionist. I've also run out of this sheet as well. And then the most recently, the Ellsworth Kelly stamp, which also got quite a buzz among the art world because it's such, so vibrant and colorful, but to have a conceptual artist represented by the USPS, we were all thrilled that it could be done.
Yeah.
And then of course, this is my one personal sheet of Andy Warhol stamp that I have, that I scanned. And then the beautiful Louise Nevelson stamp. And I wanted to show you that here you have 3 buildings. You have the list here, another building here, and this one here, the chemistry building, and they're all by I.M. Pei. And he himself, because we have a percent for our program where if there's a new building, the architect and the committee chooses an artist for that building, and he himself, and there's you can see the National Gallery elements of the corner there, but he chose Louise himself, and it's placed beautifully on our campus right next to the I.M. Pei building. So there's that.
It's great.
So yeah.
Shout out to Louise.
Shout out to Louise, yes.
I was going to make a comment about the Louise Nevelson sheet.
Yes.
And something that you said earlier is just very resonant. The question is like, how are you going to take something that is a room and reduce it to be a stamp? That doesn't make any sense. You can't do that.
Right.
But I thought that what would be important would be to show things from one single box to in white, because that was one of her colors, to single boxes stacked in black, and then and gold, and then on the far left of the sheet is actually boxes that are stacked in that angle, but that the photo of her, which is on the selvage, it's not a stamp itself, but it places a human inside of her work. So I think somebody can get the reference that what they're looking at here is not the actual size of these things. I'm hoping that somebody could get that as a reference. And, I have loved her work my entire life. I can't tell you the day that I was introduced to it, but I know I was in college, let's say. And so I have this affinity for making this collage of things and putting it together, and her ability to do that was so amazing. But this photograph was taken by Arnold Newman, and one of the great 20th century portrait photographers who shot every major artist, I think. And I hadn't found the photo yet. I hadn't found the image yet that I could use on the side of the stamp. And we contacted Arnold Newman, and he said, well, come on up. I've got lots of stuff for you to look at. I got lots of stuff. And so he literally gave me the 2¼ by 2¼ boxes at his light table to go through and find something. You find it,
Uh-huh.
I mean, I was in awe of him, of the freedom to look through that stuff, but also because he had prints that he had made for the artists signed back to him on his wall. So the Picasso photo that he took was signed back to Arnold Newman from
Wow.
Picasso. But Stravinsky and Carl Sandburg and all of the, not necessarily visual artists. So it was an extraordinary experience for me. I love being able to say something about that because nobody knows about it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Amazing.
nobody knows about it. So I think the side photo here, and in the Ruth Asawa case, the drawing, the her doing the drawing, I think is very meaningful. It's not like she just starts with the wire. She does know what she's doing. She knows where she's headed. And the point that you made about the color of her work, which is very subtle, it's all the different wires,
Right.
wire types.
Copperish and
bronze,
various
black.
metals.
Exactly. And so it's true, the sheet looks as if, I'm going to pull that one back up. It does look as if it's all so subtle. But it's subtle because the wire is subtle. And I'm hiding something that I want to make a point about. I can't figure out how to get rid of my shoulder. I think I can do this. There it is. Okay, so the lower right is that whole collection of work. So again, the point here was sometimes the work itself is one piece. Sometimes it's a collection of works that makes one piece, or it makes a grouping. And the one on the bottom row, the one in from the left, is a small piece relative to these others. But again, it shows the range, and it's all dimensional. The shadows are so important.
They're so important. Absolutely.
And
it shows the three-dimensionality of them,
Absolutely. And even though I know that the estate would have loved for me to have two-dimensional art on here, I think it would have changed the texture of this completely. And it would have stopped your eye because it's flat and because it could be right up in the front. So in any case, I think ultimately that these shapes are phenomenal. And it was a real joy to, which ones can't sit next to each other, and then there's ones that can. So it's a delicate balance.
So how many images do you start with originally? Do you start with hundreds and we, start calling them out, or how do you make these decisions?
It's just
hard.
It's just hard. I think I must have had 100 photos of 100 different pieces of her work. And let me show you something else. This is Ruth in her living room, I believe. So you can now see that some things are hanging, some things are dimensional up from the floor. And I love this image. And I was trying so hard to literally have you take the stamps out of this image, take the sculptures out of this image. But the more you study it and the more you look at what's going to work, you realize some are not quite as sharp as they need to be to be a stamp. Some are a little softer, but boy, I thought it would really be a magic show if we could, peel the stamps away. Love that, love that image.
So I'd like to mention that because I don't think everyone knows this, but Ruth was born in Norwalk, California in 1926. But then she was sent to the Japanese internment camp in Santa Anita in 1942. And I think this is an important story to tell because her only real formal art training was at the camp, and there were a lot of Walt Disney animators and drawers who were also in the camp with her, who sort of taught her how to draw. And then the other only formal training she's had, which is a great one, was at the Black Mountain College in 1946, where she studied with Joseph Albers and others. And here's the card that she was given so that she could leave the internment camp to prove that she was now allowed not to be in the camp. And so, but then she moved to San Francisco and continued her work there. And she taught for many years. She was an educator. She was an advocate for many great causes. But it was at Black Mountain where she learned that she was really interested in making lines, and one of the best ways for her to make lines was through wires and not through painting or drawings. And so it really, things connected for her to push her in the direction to create the art that we now know is hers. And I think the story is really interesting.
Well, and in addition to that, I understand that she went on a trip to Mexico with her sister. And there's a lot about weaving with metals and for baskets or other kinds of handy home needs.
Yeah.
And that was also pivotal because she learned how to twist the wire and keep twisting it. My God, they're huge. I mean, some of these pieces are 10, 11 feet tall. So it was really an incorporation, I think, of all of this learning and continuous doing. There's some great photos in the book that came out also this year with her making the sculptures and all the kids around her doing all kinds of other things, sitting on the sculpture, sitting on the table, sitting on the side or whatever. But it was like that was a passion, such a passion. So
now you can certainly see the basket form in her artwork, and I love the fact that she takes something that's very hard, the wires, and create the softness, the volume, and it's just I love that she's getting all this attention, not only through her artwork, through museums and galleries, but through the stamp. In a way, the audience that she achieves through the stamp is much more than she would in a museum, or certainly in a gallery.
I don't know the exact amount, and I'm just gonna guess the amount, but it's something. Well, on the sheet of stamps, there's 10 different stamps, and they're repeated twice, right? So there's 20 stamps. I think they printed 50 million stamps. So we're not going to run out yet, but still buy them. So it's really 20 divided into that number, and I may be off by a few million.
Yeah. And I also love that, she's being recognized again now, but she was noticed early on that she was very talented, and so her first exhibition in New York was 1954. soon after Black Mountain College. And then in 1965, Walter Hopps created a solo exhibition for her at the Pasadena Art Museum, which is now the Norton Simon Museum.
Oh,
And then she's in almost, she's in fantastic collections throughout the world, including the, San Francisco Museum of Art, the Young Museum, and most recently there was a solo exhibition at the Pulitzer Foundation, which is in St. Louis, which was it had been a while since she had a solo exhibition, so people had an opportunity to see the works in person, and it was just, it was really well received.
yeah, fabulous, fabulous.
Yeah. And in the age of social media, I think what's been really great is, one, people are instantly passing on information. I discovered this new artist, I discovered this new stamp. But also, what's been really great is people have been passing on the image of the artist also. And so there's been, especially through Instagram, because it's such a visual medium, that people can share images,
Yeah.
and people comment. And I love the fact that there's been fantastic people scrolling in to find these images, but of her art, but also
Great shot of
revealing the artist herself. It's sort of the perfect medium for sharing images. And I think, yeah,
Oh.
and so I love, and I happened to capture that one image that you spoke of. So the one on the right is this person who loves the art and create this for their child, and then there's this shot of shot by Imogene Cunningham, who's an incredible photographer, of Ruth sitting there with her children among her art. So
exactly.
Yeah, it's just been really fun. And we love the fact that you get to create all these. And what are you working on now?
Well, I can't tell you any of that. Postal Service has to announce those kinds of things, not me. And
right.
There will be stamps in 2021, I promise you.
Great.
And further out, but we don't talk about what I'm currently working on. And the Ruth Asawa stamp, I think, is the last stamp that came out this year. I think the Hanukkah stamp also came out right after, a week later. But it's been quite a year with great stamps.
And do you normally work on more than one project at a time, or is there?
Depending, 6, 8, or 10, or 12. So I'm always juggling. They're all in different stages. So one might be a subject and you go like, oh my God, how am I going to do this one? All the way through to sending the final files to the pre-press people before it goes to the printer.
Great. So people have been piling in with questions, and maybe we'll get to, we're going to try to get to as many as we can. So I'll start early. And Kristen Becker asks, what's the typical time frame from idea to print?
I'd say 2 to 3 years. It looks like it's easy. It looks like it's fast.
It does not look easy to us. It really doesn't. It seems magical.
There's so many layers of approvals, and then questions like, well, who took the picture? Are they still alive? They give you the rights to it? I mean, especially when we're using photography, it's, none of this happens without a team of people who are extraordinary. Yeah. And so there are researchers, writers, people who know so much more than I do by the time I get the project, that they can just do a mind dump with me. And then sometimes it's a writer and I feel like I need to read a couple of the books that they've written, because
Yeah.
how I don't even know which direction to go in until I feel grounded in the work that they do. So, so that couple of years plus.
Yeah. So I have a question that's a bit nerdy, so I completely relate to this, and it's from Randy Steiner, and it says, Ethel is so gifted in that she can see the big image and the smallest details. We benefit from her eye. Good observation, Randy. And he asked, I'm curious as to how the font style is selected for different stamps and the word forever. I love font questions.
Randy is a she, just so
Ah,
you know. She is an architect, so she also delves into the details of things. And selecting the right font is so much a part of it. And you know, you get 4 designers in a room and you get 8 or 10 decisions about what the font should be. So it's about battling that out. And you know, everybody's got their opinions, but if you do it this way, if you do it that way. So again, let me go back to which one? Oh, you had the, yeah. So these are, I just wanted it to be there and not be louder than her work, not get in the way of her work, just subtly be there. And in each of these, there had to be some little twists. There's a drop shadow on some of the lettering on some of the stamps. It's gray and black, or white, and the third one over on the top row, it's white. So, but they all had to feel like they were balanced. So Randy, that was such a good question. It's about balance.
And a couple of people are asking, including Sandra Morgan and, oh, I lost that thread. But they're curious about what other stamps that you yourself have worked on.
I don't understand the question.
Oh, what stamps have you designed besides Ruth Asawa?
Oh, there's about 150 different issuances. I'm going to show you one other thing, just because I brought it as a sample. And this one is to form a more perfect union. It's on the civil rights movement and the 50th anniversary of many of the milestones of the civil rights movement. And quite frankly, we could have done it as photography, could have done it as, I don't know what else, could have done it as photography. This is all art. And it's all art that people made from their own art. Ramir Bearden is down there on the bottom. We had to identify what the milestones were, and then find the best piece of art or photograph or sculpture to interpret that milestone. So the Brown v. Board of Education, so that Ramir Bearden image on the lower right just felt like it answered the call. I don't think we could have done this with photography. You can imagine the reportage photography from all of these really scary moments in American history. And I think the fact that this was more like a curated exhibit, influenced by an exhibit that I saw at the Smithsonian traveling exhibit group, because people made art because they wanted to say something, right? I mean, that's what people do. And so there was a lot of pushback on this, but it was like, how are we going to do this so that there's not a riot?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Because these are sort of almost like tributes in a way, you know?
yes, yes. And so, and the quote in the middle is by Martin Luther King. And, you know, it just felt to me like I don't get to do everything about art. I mean, sometimes it's about, well, this was a very arty year. I did
Mm-hmm.
have American Gardens this year. The 19th Amendment, women getting the vote 100 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, you got to figure out what style and what is it that you want to impress upon
Mm-hmm.
the audience. I'm going to take that one down. I'll put her back up.
Yeah. Somebody asked, how did you get the first stamp and what made you think you can do that?
Yeah, yeah. So often the question is, how did you get to be chosen as one of the art directors?
There's another one like that. Yep.
How'd you make it up there?
Yep.
And graphic design communications is all I've ever done. But I had 8 years working with what used to be called the United States Information Agency, telling America's story to the world. And there were an array of subjects, just like stamps, where we had to make an exhibit out of it, and it would travel. So it was everything from American history to entrepreneurship, you know, esoteric, but also very pragmatic titles. And I think that gave me a very good grounding. And
Yeah.
when I got a call about being an art director for stamps, I did not hesitate. I guess in seconds. But
It's good problem solving, right? How do you take a 20-foot object and make it into a 1-inch thing?
That's right. That's right. And not everything. And one of the first assignments I got was put the Grand Canyon on a stamp. So that actually was a real challenge. Grand Canyon on a stamp. Okay, fine. You must be kidding. There's a
That's
lot of
great.
learning to do in that process.
So the last time that I recall the US postage stamp having such a popular culture phenomenon was through the movie Fargo. That was in 1996 by the Coen brothers, and it was a fantastic movie if you haven't seen it. I think there's a current TV series that's going on now. But Frances McDormand, who's the police, her husband is an artist who's designing a stamp. And I did want to share this with our younger audience who hasn't seen the movie. I recommend you seeing it, but this is the last time that I recalled that the stamp was in such popular culture.
They announced it.
They announced it.
Yeah.
So?
3-cent stamp.
You're a mallard?
Yeah.
That's terrific.
It's just a 3-cent.
It's terrific.
Hoffman's Blue Wing Teal got the 29-cent. People don't much use the 3-cent.
Oh, for peace, of course they do. Whenever they raise the postage, people need the little stamps.
Yeah?
When they're stuck with a bunch of the old ones.
Yeah. I guess.
It's terrific. I'm so proud.
So that little snippet. Oops. I got to. Okay, I have to. Great. I think that little snippet, it really says a lot about being an artist and being an artist spouse, you know.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
and you know, we are all thrilled that the Ruth Asawa stamp is a forever stamp, and not a 3-cent stamp.
Well, now you know why they changed it, because this way they can keep it on as long as they have them, as long
Mm-hmm.
as the print run lasts, instead of having to figure out what to do with them. Anyway, we're happy about the forever.
Yeah. One question is, talk more about the women vote stamp.
Yay. Women vote. I worked with Nancy Stahl from New York. I think what I need to say is that as art director, I'm given the assignment, the subject, and then they say, okay, now you go get it done. And sometimes it's relatively clear to me what needs to happen, and sometimes it's not so clear. And it's always up to the art director. Do you want to bring in an illustrator? Do you want to do it by photography? You're going to use stock photography, or are you going to use stock illustration? Preferences to use original illustration, so you're working with the different illustrators. And in this case, I worked with Nancy Stahl. We've worked together on several other stamps. A woman illustrator, highly recognized. And there's even a photo that she took, or someone took, of her standing on a table while she wrapped a tablecloth around her as if that was a white skirt, and she had a sun hat, and she needed the photograph because she needed people to be standing a certain way. So she really put her whole self into it, That's a case of, I love you guys, but I would definitely want a woman to do the woman vote stamp. I've done stamps on Latin dance, and I used 4 different Latin illustrators, and hoped that they were going to come together at some point, and it did. So it's just a very intuitive, but also research-oriented assignment. Everyone is different. Every single one is different.
And this next question is research oriented, and it seems like she may be in the know. Barb Richmond asks, please talk about the printing proof process. Are you present for the press checks or for checking what had been called blue lines or silver proofs? They're very technical.
Yes, and all those are very good questions. I don't have any answers to them because I was on one press inspection for the breast cancer stamp 20 odd years ago. The USPS staff inside of Postal checks the proofs that they get. They make comments about the color, and I try to trust them.
This is an interesting question. Susan Kimmel asks, do you design for collectors or for sending letters?
Absolutely sending letters.
I would hope so.
But if you want to save the sheet, that is a way that it helps the Postal Service not to use the stamps, because you're paying for a service that you're not getting.
Oh, so
okay.
My 97 sheets of the Asawa stamp is helping the USPS?
Exactly. Exactly. You're one of the biggest helpers there is.
Oh my goodness.
There are issuances during the year when we say, well, that's really kind of a collector's item. A few years ago, there was a big stamp show, international stamp show in New York. And there were several issuances that year, reproductions of old stamps that were highly regarded. And so now people have the contemporary view of that. So those were definitely for collectors. I
This
don't,
sort of relates to that. Kathleen asked, and I think you answered this already, but what is a typical print run and what was the quantity for the Ruth Asawa stamp?
well, I did mention, and I could be wrong and somebody's going to shoot me when I get off the call, but I will tell you that if things are in booklets, people go into the post office and they say, give me a booklet. So they don't
Mhm.
so much care about what's in the booklet. And the booklets, they might print 400 million stamps. And if it's on a pane like this, they might only print 40 million stamps. And they're not 40 million sheets that you bought, right?
Mm,
Not 40 million of those, but divide by the number of stamps on the sheet, divide by 20.
I see.
So, uh, like, that's why the breast cancer stamp is so astonishing, because it's in the
Mhm.
billions, not a number that we normally talk about.
Hmm.
Great questions.
Yeah. I'm gonna make a little suggestion and tell people that the Ruth Asawa stamp run was very low. So if you want one, you should just run out and get it right now.
Yes,
Be
yes,
like me, or order 100 online,
right, that's true.
Um,
That's very true.
a lot of people are suggesting artists you should pick, but I think,
Nice.
oh, here's something fun. Do you collect stamps yourself?
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
Well, I always had collected stamps that I loved what they looked like. Didn't know where they came from either, but I love to put pretty stamps on envelopes. Now I collect them because I know that I should have them. I should have them to refer to.
Mm-hmm.
European stamps are often a little different than what we produce. Um, there are a lot of countries, this is another whole conversation. There are a lot of countries that actually don't design their own stamps, but they have stamps. And that's
Mm-hmm.
for collectors everywhere in the world that want to collect Mozambican stamps, for instance.
Hmm. Crazy.
Yeah, it really is. But really, they are a world into themselves, and it is very exciting um, to see the different countries and their interpretations. Like, many of us have done many things on nature. So many of those things are very different. So everybody's interpretation of nature, whatever aspect of nature it um, is different. I started way in the beginning doing 4 stamps on flora and fauna of
Hmm.
Death Valley. And I went, I haven't been to Death Valley, but I can't think of a single flora. It turned into a 12-year series, 120 stamps of different biomes. Look at all these words that I learned. I mean, it's just phenomenal. So it was Sonoran Desert is what we chose to do, but we also did Pacific Coast rainforest. So each of those scenes had 10 stamps in it.
Hmm.
I don't think any other country did that, but 120 stamps, 12 years.
Yeah. So I have the next one is a little story and a question from
Okay.
Claudia, who didn't put in her last name. But when my son was a little boy, he said, "I want my picture on a stamp." He used to draw pictures in the corner of his artwork just like a stamp. He went on to study at Ruth Asawa School of the Arts and Fine Arts program, and now he's at the Academy Arts University. So that's wonderful. How old was the youngest artist to have their artwork on your stamp? That's a tough question.
Tough question, because before I became part of the team, they did, at least once, they did a, like a school project. And they let all, it was open to all schools. I don't know what the grade level was, but third, fourth, fifth, something like that. And it was a whole sheet of stamps of those age kids. That's not necessarily what I would say if I'm going to art direct the stamp. Who am I calling to art direct the stamp, to illustrate the stamp? It may not be a third or fourth or fifth grader.
Yeah.
Somebody needs a little more cred.
That's why we all have refrigerators, I think. Well, Ethel, this has been a delight, and I feel like we could go on for hours just drilling down on stamps and amazing artwork that you've done throughout your career and all the accomplishments. And I just want to thank you again from all the people in the art world, not only doing just Ruth Asawa, which we love, it's fantastic, but also putting images of artist work on the US postage stamp. It means so much to all of us working in the field.
I am so glad, and it's true for the art directors as well. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And I want to thank everyone for joining this conversation. There's so many of you, and I try to get to as many questions as I could. But we want to thank you for joining us, and go out and buy as many stamps as you can. And now we know you shouldn't use it, so it's great for all the collectors. And then I will save my 97 and buy another 100 more to send Christmas cards. So
them. Yes,
yeah,
use them.
Great. Well, we're going to say goodbye and thank you for attending.
And Paul,
thank you, Ethel.
Thank you.
All right.